The Space Within, a Buddha Reflection. There was a time when I believed peace would come after I understood everything. After I found the right answer, the right explanation, the right way to live. My mind kept searching, asking, trying to solve life like a puzzle that needed completion. But slowly, something quieter began to reveal itself. I started noticing a space within awareness that remained calm even when thoughts were restless. Even when emotions moved like weather across the sky. The Buddha once pointed toward this same discovery, not as an idea to believe, but as something you can recognize directly in your own experience. In this reflection, I want to explore that space with you, and how the mind's endless search for answers sometimes hides the peace that has been here all along. The quiet space already here. There are moments when the mind becomes tired of its own searching. Not because life has been solved, but because the constant effort to solve it begins to feel unnecessary. You may notice this during an ordinary pause. Sitting quietly, perhaps after a long day, you suddenly sense something simple and surprising. Life is already happening without your management. The Buddha often pointed toward this gentle discovery. He noticed that the mind believes peace must be built through effort, through understanding, through careful control of experience. Yet when attention relaxes even slightly, another truth becomes visible. Awareness itself has never been disturbed. Emotions rise and fall within it like wind moving across water, but the space of awareness remains open and unchanged. When you begin to notice this, the pressure to become something slowly softens. Life begins to feel less like a project and more like a participation. Not something you must earn or achieve, but something you are already inside. The urge to understand everything. Even after this recognition appears, the mind often returns to its old habit. It wants to understand what just happened. It wants to define the peace it briefly felt. It asks questions quietly at first, then more urgently. What does this mean? How do I keep it? What is the right way to live now? The Buddha observed this movement carefully. He saw that the mind often mistakes explanation for safety. When life feels uncertain, the mind tries to build certainty through ideas. It gathers answers like stones, hoping that enough of them will create a stable ground. But answers rarely bring the calm they promise. For a moment, they may soothe the mind, yet soon another question appears. The ground remains unstable because the mind is trying to control what cannot be controlled. Life continues to unfold beyond explanation, and the search continues. Seeing this pattern does not require rejecting thought. It simply reveals that understanding has limits. Peace does not grow from solving every question. It grows from noticing the space in which questions appear. The body that wants safety. The mind runs when it feels threatened, but calm appears when the body remembers it is safe. The Buddha's attention was not limited to thought. He watched the body as carefully as the mind. He noticed that agitation rarely begins with philosophy. It begins with tension. The breath shortens, the shoulders tighten, attention narrows. Much of the mind's questioning is simply the body searching for safety. The nervous system constantly scans the world for unpredictability. When something feels unclear or unstable, the body becomes alert. The mind then steps in with questions. It tries to resolve the uncertainty through explanation. You may recognize this pattern in yourself. When you are tired or overwhelmed, the mind asks more questions. It worries more, analyzes more, searches more intensely for answers. The Buddha saw that understanding alone cannot calm this cycle. The body must feel safe first. When the breath slows, when attention softens, when the body settles, the mind naturally quiets. Questions lose their urgency. Curiosity remains, but the pressure behind it dissolves. Listening beneath the questions. When questioning arises with urgency, the Buddha would not immediately chase the answer. Instead, he looked deeper. He listened for what the question was truly asking. Often the question beneath the question is simple. Am I safe right now? When the mind feels unsettled, it searches outward. It examines the future, replays the past, builds explanations. But these efforts rarely bring relief because the source of tension is not conceptual. It is physical, emotional, immediate. You may notice this in quiet moments. The mind is searching for meaning, yet the body is simply asking for rest. When this becomes clear, something gentle shifts. Instead of arguing with your thoughts, you begin to care for the conditions beneath them. Slower breathing, a quieter environment, a softer pace of living. The Buddha described this not as escape from life, but as wise attention. The mind becomes calmer not because every question is solved, but because the body no longer feels threatened. Compassion for the restless mind. Many people judge themselves for overthinking. They believe their minds are broken or overly complicated. But when the Buddha looked carefully, he saw something different. The restless mind is usually a protective mind. The body learned long ago that uncertainty might bring harm. So it stays alert. It watches carefully. It asks questions again and again, hoping that understanding will prevent pain. When you see this clearly, judgment softens. The mind is not your enemy. It is simply trying to protect you with the tools it knows. This recognition itself brings relief. Instead of fighting your thoughts, you meet them with quiet understanding. You recognize the effort beneath them, the attempt to stay safe. And strangely, when the mind feels understood, it often relaxes. The questions slow down. Not because they were forced to stop, but because the need behind them has been gently acknowledged. Insight and Awareness Quiz. After you have listened, open the quiz tab. The questions reveal how you interpreted what you heard and invite you to notice the hidden logic in your reactions. Then, share your score in the comments. When resistance softens. Peace appears when the mind stops arguing with what already exists. Another pattern the Buddha saw clearly was resistance. The moment something unpleasant appears, the mind says quietly, "This should not be happening." From that small sentence, tension spreads through the whole body. Resistance creates a second layer of suffering. The event itself may be difficult, but the inner fight makes it heavier. Thoughts multiply, emotions intensify, attention becomes trapped in conflict. When resistance softens, something remarkable happens. The situation may remain unchanged, yet the mind feels lighter. Non-resistance does not mean approval. It does not mean liking what is happening. It simply means recognizing reality before trying to change it. From that simple honesty, clarity begins to return. The mind no longer wastes energy arguing with the moment. That energy becomes available for understanding and response. The strength inside surrender. At first, surrender can feel frightening. The mind imagines that letting go of resistance means giving up. It fears becoming passive or weak. The Buddha discovered something very different. Surrender is not collapse, it is alignment. When the inner fight stops, the mind becomes clearer. You begin to see what is actually happening instead of the story you wish were true. From that clarity, action becomes more precise. You may notice this in simple situations. When you stop arguing internally with a difficulty, you suddenly see what needs to be done. Sometimes it is speaking firmly. Sometimes it is stepping back. Sometimes it is simply waiting. Surrender does not remove strength. It removes confusion. The energy once used for resistance becomes available for wise action. Action without inner war. There is a common misunderstanding that calm people become passive. Yet the Buddha's life showed the opposite. When the mind is not divided against reality, action becomes cleaner. Decisions come from clarity instead of pressure. You respond instead of reacting. Imagine speaking with someone who is upset. If your mind is full of resistance, you defend yourself quickly. Words come out sharp and rushed. But when the mind is calm, you listen more carefully. Your response becomes deliberate. The conversation moves differently. This is the quiet intelligence of non-resistance. It does not remove responsibility. It simply removes the inner war that distorts perception. Without that war, wisdom has room to move. The moment that needs nothing. When the mind stops leaning forward, the present moment becomes complete. Another discovery gradually appears when resistance fades. The moment itself no longer feels like a problem to solve. Most people live as if now is unfinished. The present is treated like a bridge leading to something better. Work leads to rest. Effort leads to success. Patience leads to happiness. But when attention settles deeply, something simple becomes visible. This moment already exists fully on its own. It does not need the future to justify it. The Buddha often invited people to notice this directly. Breath rising and falling, sound appearing and fading, light touching the ground. Nothing in these experiences demands completion. They simply appear, exist briefly, and pass away. Seeing this changes how time feels. Life becomes less like a race and more like a rhythm. The habit of leaning forward. Yet the mind has practiced postponement for a long time. Even when nothing is wrong, it leans slightly toward the future. You may notice this while listening to someone speak. Part of your attention is already planning the next task, or waiting for the conversation to end. This habit fragments attention. The present becomes a means rather than a place. The Buddha gently encouraged people to notice this movement without judgment. Simply seeing the leaning forward is often enough for it to pause. And when it pauses, even briefly, relief appears. The body relaxes. The mind becomes quieter. Not because something was achieved, but because something unnecessary was released. When experience stands on its own. As this recognition deepens, the moment begins to feel whole again. Pain can be felt directly instead of endured while waiting for relief. Joy can be enjoyed without the fear of losing it. Ordinary experiences regain their richness. Walking becomes simply walking. Breathing becomes simply breathing. The Buddha saw that suffering grows when experience is compared constantly with something else. When pain is compared with the hope of future comfort, it feels heavier. When joy is compared with the fear of loss, it becomes fragile. But when experience is allowed to stand on its own, the mind relaxes its grip. Life becomes simpler, more immediate, less tangled in expectation. The voice that narrates everything. The mind speaks endlessly, yet peace appears when listening becomes deeper than thought. Even when the moment feels complete, another subtle habit may remain. The mind continues to narrate everything. It comments on each experience, explains it, judges it, compares it. This narration creates a small distance between you and life. The Buddha noticed that awareness itself does not require commentary. Seeing happens before the words arrive. Hearing happens before the explanation forms. When attention rests directly with experience, the narration naturally softens. Thoughts still appear, but they no longer dominate perception. Life feels closer, more vivid, less filtered through interpretation. Curiosity without urgency. Curiosity itself begins to change. Earlier, questioning may have felt restless, driven by the need to solve life quickly. But now curiosity becomes quieter. It explores rather than searches. The Buddha encouraged this gentle curiosity. It is not trying to escape the moment. It is simply interested in how experience unfolds. This curiosity does not create tension. It coexists with peace. Questions may still appear, but they do not demand immediate answers. They are like clouds drifting through a wide sky. Participating instead of controlling. Over time, life begins to feel less like something you must manage and more like something you are participating in. This does not remove responsibility. You still make choices, still care for others, still respond to challenges. But the inner pressure to control every outcome fades. The Buddha described this as moving in harmony with the nature of things. When actions arise from clarity instead of fear, they align more easily with reality. You act when action is needed. You rest when rest is possible. You allow life to unfold without constant interference. There is a quiet dignity in this way of living. The peace that was never missing. Freedom appears when the mind stops searching for what has always been present. Eventually, a simple realization becomes clear. Peace was never something the mind needed to manufacture. It was the space in which every experience had always appeared. Thoughts, emotions, questions, uncertainty. All of it moving within awareness like waves moving across the ocean. The Buddha did not ask people to create this peace. He simply invited them to notice it. When the mind stops chasing answers for a moment, the space becomes visible again. Life continues to change. Joy and difficulty still come and go. But beneath these movements, something steady remains. Not owned, not achieved, simply here. And from this quiet recognition, living becomes lighter, clearer, and gently free. This is Buddha Reflections, where philosophy, insight, and lived experience meet to explore mind, impermanence, and release. The conversation doesn't end here. Visit the quiz tab and share your score in the comments. Thanks for your time. It's been a delight. What should we explore next? Comment, share, and save your insight. Subscribe to Orbital Dharma and keep your thoughts bright.